So it was title day for Marc Márquez today. So he's finally completed the comeback story. I was going to say redemption story, but I don't know what there was to redeem. A crash. Comeback story is complete with more pages to be written now, I'm sure. And it came on what this season is, I guess, a strange weekend for Marc, where he hasn't won any races. So let's talk about that. And of course, we're going to talk about everything else that's happening in MotoGP at the moment. As always, link below or chaptered below everything. If you want to skip ahead to anything, go for it. We're obviously starting with Marc Márquez and the events of this weekend. And we will go into things like stuff I didn't talk about in my last video, which is this change up from Doohan about the what's credited as a Grand Prix win or Grand Prix championship. And we'll go into all that, as I said. Of course, fantasy, we're going to talk about MotoGP Fantasy, the All Japan Cup, which had a interesting result this weekend, as well as Moto2 and Moto3 is coming later in the video. Marc Márquez, like I said, the celebrations to start with, and I'm not usually a fan of these kind of like over the top, almost cheesy things where it's like, I always think the title celebrations are a little bit over the top, no matter who it is. But it's a part of the fun of it now, and I thought it was actually quite well done with the screen at the end, and there'll be the pictures coming out of this weekend are going to be Marc squatting down in front of that screen and hugging the tower and all that stuff. It's all going to be iconic imagery now going forward, isn't it? So it is complete now, and in a career of dominant championship winning seasons, this is the dominant season in a career of those dominant seasons. So quite possibly his best championship win. I mean, there'll be different opinions on that based on, he's done it on maybe a few that he's won at Honda. While the Honda is still a good bike, there were ones where maybe it wasn't the best bike on the grid, and, maybe around that 2017, 2018 time. I don't know. I'm struggling to remember back now to think how good the Honda was then, but it was a period there where no one else could do much on it, maybe except Cal Crutchlow was decent on it and won a couple of races, but other than that, it was just Marc. So do you rank those higher? Is this, with the dominance of it, the best one when you see him, when he is the best guy on the best bike? How good actually is he compared to the other guys around him? This much better. There's still 5 races to go and he's wrapped up the championship, 17 races to wrap it up. But yeah, where does this stand for you in the rankings of Marc's title wins? And speaking of the rankings, he does go up now level with Valentino Rossi to second in all-time Premier Class title wins. And I want to say second. No, total title wins. Obviously, when you're including like your Nietos and things, I wonder where they both sit in that, both with 9 now altogether, where obviously that will lead us into later our chat about what counts as a world championship win now. But the arc is complete. And on that, a lot of talk about it being considered up there with the greatest comebacks of all time. I watched the Dorna feed for this one. I didn't watch the TNT, which I usually do, mainly because TNT Sports, when I woke up this morning, I didn't set my alarm for this one. I did yesterday for the sprint. I didn't this morning because I needed the sleep, to be honest, this morning. So it's like, when I went to bed last night, I was like, I'm not going to set it. I'll just get up and watch it. TNT puts the replays up straight away. I got up this morning. TNT didn't have the Moto3 race replay up yet. This was at about 7, maybe 8 o'clock. And what they had up for the MotoGP race replay was just the 45-minute build-up to the race. And then as soon as it got to like them lining up on the grid, that was the end of the stream or the replay. As far as I'm aware, it's about midday now. When I last checked, I watched the checkered flag on TNT afterwards to see all the post-race stuff. And at about 11 o'clock, I want to say, when I started watching that, it still wasn't up, which I know will frustrate a lot of people. So just something there. If you want to know where I'm getting it from, it's through the Discovery Plus app on the TV. So whether on different platforms or if you have a direct subscription with TNT, it's already up, or you have to get it through Discovery Plus. I don't know how it works completely. It's not my Discovery Plus account, to be fair. The password generously gifted to me so that I can watch. So I did have to find an alternative. I don't know, is it safe to go out and say what websites you're watching when you're not watching legitimate streams of it, but I did find another. I do have another website I go to for these situations. Should I say what it is? Maybe if people want to privately message me on Twitter or Instagram or something, I can tell you what it is. If you have trouble finding streams, let me know and I can let you know. Not that I obviously encourage illegally watching stuff, but let's be honest, who can afford this shit these days, right? I've gone off on a tangent there. What was I talking about? Oh, I've actually done myself in there. Anyway, well, let's just talk about the race then, shall we? So we'll talk about Pecco for a little bit, actually, because at the start of the season, I still had Marc down as the absolute clear favourite to win the World Championship, I had Pecco doing this maybe a handful of times and making an actual good title fight. Maybe 4 or 5 times Pecco was going to turn up because this is when he's at his best. This is it. And there's obviously, I've mentioned it in the past, there is a little bit of a feeling around Pecco that it's like, well, if he wasn't just in the right place at the right time, is he just dovey, right? And I get that argument. It's an argument I've acknowledged several times. But I think what sets him apart and what does make him a worthy 2-time world champion is when he's at his absolute best, and things are feeling good for him, this is what he's like. This is what he can do. And we'd all started to forget that. I'd forgotten it almost completely. When you watch him this season, it looks so out of sorts that it was like, did that guy ever actually exist? Well, yeah, because on the day one-on-one with Marc, he's just put together a perfect weekend. Pole, sprint win, Grand Prix. So I did have him down as doing this maybe 4 or 5 times this season. I don't know about the rest of you, but just I figured at a few races where he liked the circuit and that he was comfortable, even Marc wasn't going to touch him on those days, which is what happened here. I will caveat that with Marc had not a lot to gain by being aggressive today, did he? So I do feel like that is a part of it. Marc didn't go as hard. Like if this was race 3 of the season or something, I feel like Marc probably makes a contest out of that. He goes harder to get into second place earlier and then pushes harder to maybe catch Pecco. But once, and then obviously the stuff with Pecco, I still don't know what's happened with Pecco's engine, that he was blowing smoke. And he did say in his interview afterwards that he felt a little bit of underperformance out of a few corners, but not until the last 4 or 5 laps. So it didn't affect him until then. And they are the laps that Marc closed in a little bit. Also think maybe he was winding down a bit and Marc just sort of kept his pace. Maybe Marc stepped it up to try and put a bit of pressure on late in the race. I haven't seen the lap time breakdown, so I don't know which one it was. But I think it was he was pretty comfortable the whole time, other than the fact that he didn't know about it probably, but his bike could have let go of him at any moment. Luckily, it wasn't dropping any oil or anything, which would have resulted in him getting obviously told to pull aside. So, and obviously, very big risk of Marc going down in a situation like that following him. So, very lucky nothing like that happened, which can happen sometimes when you see an engine starting to blow smoke like that. But everyone got there in the end. It's a Ducati 1-2, Ducati Lenovo 1-2. And yeah, just wanted to mention that this is what I had Pecco down as doing all season. And then on races where I saw Marc just being better, which is most races, probably 15 out of the 20 or 16 out of the 21 or however many races we got this season, 17 out of the 21 or whatever, Marc I thought would be better. But on the other races, I thought it would be Pecco doing this and then Pecco being on the podium most weeks other than that. And our title fight may have gone to the last few races rather than 5 races, last 2 or 3 races. So maybe even to the end. And I thought Pecco was going to be this good all season, and it just hasn't happened. Now, interestingly, the more important point in all this is, because I don't think Pecco's changed anything. He hasn't been able to ride around it, and just to be able, the thought that he just has turned up one week, rode a bit different, and then all of a sudden he's beating Marc one-on-one, perfect weekend. But the idea that he's just turned up and changed something, and all of a sudden that, like, why wouldn't you have done that earlier? That, for me, that's not a possibility. I have heard something. I didn't hear a lot. They didn't mention it on commentary very much. And obviously when it's the time zone that it is that you're watching the races, you don't watch the practice or anything, so you don't hear what's happening too much. But slight suggestion, whether this is confirmed or not yet, someone let me know. I haven't, obviously it's right after the race finish here. Like I said, it's about midday. The race finished a few hours ago. I haven't listened to any podcasts or seen anything that suggested this completely, but I did hear an off mention from maybe Neil Hodgson saying he's got a lot of 24 spec parts back on the bike, which is a little damning for the factory if your 25 bike just runs better with 24 bits on it. That's what I would suggest would probably be the case that makes the most sense. In my head anyway, that's the only way that you would find this, other than maybe Pecco turns up and everything just happens to work good for him in Motegi for some reason. I think what's happened is they've put some old bits on the bike for the bike that Pecco was always comfortable on, and he's now comfortable on it, which begs the question, whose stubbornness makes it take this long for it to happen? Surely this question got asked as soon as Pecco was like, I can't ride this. I'm qualifying like 8th and, I'm going backwards in races, dropping down to the back end of the points and stuff. At what point? Surely the very next day you're like, guys, what if we just chuck the old bits on it? That conversation's surely happening earlier. You've waited till the championship is literally over. Like, why aren't they doing this round 6? Give yourselves a chance. Anyway, it's all academic now. But will we see, can Pecco now do this and at least be fighting with Marc for the rest of the season to the point where he catches Alex in the championship? Because it was looking like, how far is he going to sink? Bez is about to go past him in the championship, and could he sink further than that? Who knows? If he keeps bombing out like he did in Mazzano, result-wise. But yeah, I mean, now that he's found this kind of form, can he catch Alex? Going to be an interesting watch for the last 5 races, and how we go into 26 now with Pecco. Perhaps if he can become ultra competitive now going into next season, that might spice things up next season and give us the competition we want to see. I still think Marc has him covered, obviously, at most circuits, but you never know. At least make a fight out of it. I still can't really remember what I was talking about when I got off track earlier. Something about Marc. Yes, the telecast. This comes from Dorna's side, I suspect, because it's about the graphics and stuff going on the screen, and a little bit about the commentators and stuff. I'm not one of those guys that hates on commentators usually, unless if they say daft shit, I'll point it out, which is not that often, to be fair, from any broadcaster. But I've noticed a lot of the talk in all circles on podcasts and everything like that is about this being one of the greatest comebacks in sporting history. I tend to agree. I think that's what made this and will make this such a popular title win, is the human story behind it rather than just a sporting story. But people like me, diehard Rossi fans from back, when I was a teenager, and that makes Marc quite likable. And so when you get this human element to it, it makes the story a lot more engaging, And so a lot of talk about this being one of the greatest sporting comebacks of all time, being compared to, I think it was one of the guys on the Dorna telecast saying it was like, they mentioned Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods, and Tiger's was one of my favourite ever, with him winning the Masters. But, I mean, I don't know about the Jordan one. I don't know enough about maybe basketball that I didn't know that Jordan came back and was that good. I thought he won everything before he left, and then he came back and did he win again when he came back? Someone let me know, because I'm not a basketball follower, to be honest, very much. I'm aware that Michael Jordan is one of the greatest athletes of all time, but did he win when he came back? And he didn't come back from an injury, did he? He just went to play baseball for a bit and then come back. So I don't know why that gets... I think it's just because he's one of the biggest names in the history of sport. You just sort of mention him. But anyway, the criminal part of it is that MotoGP people are so keen to put MotoGP up there with like more mainstream sports that they're mentioning all these like mainstream sporting comebacks. Tiger, Jordan, Ali. But there's something a little closer to home that doesn't seem to get mentioned at all. And maybe I'm just a little bit put off by this because there's an Australian connection here. But our Mick, almost lost his leg. They almost took his leg. Go and research this. I'm going to make a video on this one day because I want to do a Legends video on Mick. Because obviously growing up in Australia, Mick Doohan is one of the big names in sporting history, right? But yeah, our Mick's never getting a mention in all this. This man almost lost his leg in a horrendous crash. They almost took his leg off him. It was that bad. Like a couple of months later, he was back on the bike. And then he went on to win 5 world championships after that. So I'm not taking away, not trying to do this to take away from Marc's thing. If you think this is the best comeback in sporting history, but my point is the comebacks that they're comparing it to aren't as good as our own comeback in MotoGP of Mick Doohan. If this is first, that's second. And also the disrespect goes to a point where in the graphic of all-time Premier Class World Champions that they put up at the bottom of the screen on the warm-down lap and when Marc was doing all his celebrations and that, they've even written Mike Doohan instead of Mick. I know technically that's still correct because Mike is also short for Michael, but he's Mick Doohan. He's always been Mick Doohan. He's always been known as Mick Doohan. He's in all your record books as Mick Doohan. And then on the screen at the end, some guy who doesn't know who Mick Doohan is obviously is just actually going, oh, it's Marc Doohan, I guess. The guy doing the graphics. Can we just restore a bit of legend status to Mick's name, please? Because first of all, we need to start comparing Marc's comeback to Mick's rather than to Jordan and stuff who went to play baseball. We also need to be getting his name right on the graphic, please. So unless there's something I don't know about here where Mick sent him an email and be like, it's actually Mike, in that case, fair play. If that's not the case, then can we sort this out, please? Because, a lot of talk in the last week about history being thrown away, and we'll actually get into that now. And then this is happening, and what I'm talking about here is I'm sure you've all heard if you're a big MotoGP fan, there's been a bit of a change of direction in the way that we're talking about past winners in Grand Prix motorcycle racing, if you want to call it that rather than MotoGP, Grand Prix motorcycle racing, which is a sport that's covered several classes over the 70-year history, all the way from 125ccs. Did they ever go lower than that? Maybe at some point. 125cc racing, all the way through to the modern MotoGP 4-stroke 1000cc bikes. And we've had 350s, 500s, whatever. The Premier class has always been held as a higher echelon, obviously, with the old 500s and now the MotoGP class. But we've always considered anyone who's won on one of the junior classes to be a Grand Prix world champion, motorcycle Grand Prix world champion. And all their wins are marked down as Grand Prix wins. Now, an interesting change now, and what's happened is they're now no longer considered Grand Prix wins. I don't know if that's being retrospectively changed as well, so that anyone who's won anyone's old 250 wins, for example, maybe Rossi's 250 wins, if we use an example of Rossi, aren't counted as Grand Prix wins anymore. They're just 250cc race wins. Because if you look at and I'll put it on the screen now, race schedules for Sundays, they no longer say Grand Prix as the race definition kind of thing here. So obviously next to MotoGP, 27 laps for the next round in Indonesia, Grand Prix. The Moto2 is just not a Moto2 Grand Prix, it's a Moto2 race. Okay. Now and there's so many videos on this that people talk about it, very good. And, I watched the Beehive Paddock one. It was a great channel. It's actually a cracking channel. I love that. This was my favourite MotoGP channel. And I heard Valentin Karuzny and Simon Patterson from the race do a video on it, and that was a good one because they kind of had two perspectives on it, because Valentin is a little bit more like, well, we've always considered MotoGP wins worth more anyway. But I think that the key thing here is MotoGP or motorcycle racing, Grand Prix racing, has always had a unique aspect to it that things like Formula One never had, and that's that you could have household names racing earlier in the day in junior categories and smaller bikes. And these were Grand Prix winners, Grand Prix world champions and Grand Prix riders. And it's always been one paddock. There's always been, with something like Formula One, for example, a disconnect between, in fact, to the point where Formula 2 wasn't always called Formula 2. It was like GP2, wasn't it? And it wasn't really that relevant. And you didn't really hear about guys until they got to Formula 1, for the layman anyway, or people who aren't involved in it. Whereas with MotoGP, obviously with stuff like that, you always knew about guys like Hamilton if they were coming through, but that's really it. Anyone else that wasn't the next big thing, you didn't really hear about it. But now Formula 1 is actually trying to, I think, make Formula 2 and Formula 3 a bit more like Moto 2 and Moto 3. And what MotoGP is doing, trying to get away from that, make MotoGP a little bit more Formula 1-y, where unless you won a Formula 1 world title, the rest doesn't really matter. And so I think MotoGP always had something unique in that you never even had to leave the intermediate class to be a household name and a Grand Prix world champion and a career Grand Prix rider. You could just stay there your whole career. And while I would never have probably, considered that as big as an achievement as maybe a single MotoGP world title, maybe winning like 4, Max Biaggi, 4 250 world titles, wasn't it? I'd rather have Joan Mir's 1 MotoGP world title. But it can always still turn around and be like, I'm a 4-time world champion, Grand Prix world champion in the Grand Prix paddock. So, I mean, I'd ask what you guys think of it, but it just seems to me at the moment that it's pretty universally not loved, this idea. It's relevant this weekend because they asked Marc not to promote the fact he's a 9-time world champion now. We're expecting to see the number 9 pop up a lot, like it has done, we did with Rossi, and then like both of them, when they won world championships, were always counting them as based on the 2 junior world championships they both won. For me, the interesting thing is like, it's fine if maybe you don't want to call it that. We'll still all consider it that it's a world championship. But even if you don't want to call it a Grand Prix world championship, why tell guys to not acknowledge it? Like, why aren't we acknowledging it anymore? We always did. And it was a unique aspect to it. And maybe it's something that for people new to the sport, you'd have to explain it to them. They'd be like, oh, right, I'm not really a big fan of that. Whatever. It's just the way we do it. I mean, I don't love it. To be fair. And it might have to be one of those things like, it's like Disney Star Wars, isn't it? I'm going to go off another tangent here. It's like Disney Star Wars. Like, I watch up to number 6 and everything else, which is officially canon, right? I just pretended that this isn't real. I pretend it's like fan fiction or something. Just pretend it's not real. Now, in saying that, again, like I said, I always valued MotoGP World Championships above, or Premier Class World Championships above any amount almost of lower class championships. I don't know, it's hard to explain what it is about it that's quite frustrating. Because when you look at it, if they say, well, you only count them as better than them anyway. It was like, yeah, but they still are Grand Prix world champions. It's still a Grand Prix. That race, that Moto2 race that happens before the MotoGP race, it's still a Grand Prix to me. You're still a Grand Prix winner. For me, this feels more like it's now classified more like the sprint wins. A sprint doesn't count as a Grand Prix win. Now, neither does a Moto2 win. And I'd be interested to know now, like I asked before, are they going to retrospectively go back now and eliminate all Grand Prix wins that are counted? Is Angel Nieto on 0 Grand Prix wins? That's what I want to know. Is he on 0 Grand Prix wins? Travesty if that's what they're going to... In the official history books, they're going to call it 0 Grand Prix wins. Now, I say that without knowing if Angel Nieto actually ever did win a Premier Class title. Did he ever compete in the Premier Class? But I know he won like 15 more titles or something in the junior categories. Like ridiculous numbers. Let's look him up. It's not someone I've actually looked too much into over the years, to be honest, but he's obviously, the name and he's a legend. 50cc. Yeah, so 50cc, we did used to go all the way down to that. I had a feeling we did. I was in the 60s. 125, 250, just a career, because it just suited the smaller bikes. So we just went after the smaller bikes. It was fine. Nothing wrong with that. And I know that naturally as the sport's progressed, we've lost that anyway. So it's like that doesn't really exist anymore. And they did, the year they put the age cap on Moto3, or was it 125s at the time? The year they put that age cap on it, it kind of tried to kill that off already, that you could just spend your whole career racing 125s. I think of guys like Lucio Cecchinello, always just was in and around 250s and that, and just until he retired and then he became a team owner. Like, I'm just wondering what... I feel like sometimes with this kind of stuff, similar with changing the way that the Champions Tower looks, like there's a small change, but it's a change. I feel like, and this is a thing not just with sports like this, but also big companies and stuff. Sometimes I feel like they need to make changes for the sake of making changes. Like if you sat around a boardroom and put this forward and just discuss the benefits and negatives of this, I don't know what you'd really come up with as like one of the main benefits. And if you do come up with a couple of little things like, oh, maybe it makes it easier for people to sort of understand who the Premier Class World Champions are without having to be like, well, actually, I know he's won the most world titles, but he's not actually the best of all time because he only did it in 125s and 50cc and 250s. But he's actually won a MotoGP world title. So technically he's actually higher up there. And I know it's like maybe that's your main argument. But even when you sat down and discussed all that together, you'd be like, yeah, but so what? Would you not still just at the end of that be like, yeah, but fine. Doesn't mean we have to change it. And then you'd go, well, I guess it doesn't, does it? I mean, it's not that big of an issue. It's like when companies do these rebrands and stuff and you're like, yeah, but why'd you do that? You're like, wow, it's more modern. Yeah, but so what? Like, who cares? You've taken something very recognizable and unique and you've made it not. So I feel like it's a change for the sake of change is what I'm saying. And it didn't need to happen. It doesn't need to happen. How much longer do I need to go on about this? Anyway, we've got more stuff to talk about. Let's talk about the All Japan Cup because I wanted to talk about Joan Mir in Honda's backyard, Honda-owned circuit. He's gone and got himself a podium, which is fantastic. I'm really happy with this because it's nice to see a guy that's been through what he's been through get a little bit of reward for the efforts, you know. And it's one of these things with Honda that you always look at it and you go, well, you know, Joan Mir's not produced a lot. You know, Marini's, while he's solid, is he really a top guy? Should they be looking to try and entice, you know, a big star or whatever? Maybe just the guys that were with you during the shit. Maybe just let them have a chance because they've had to do all the shit stuff, the shit work. And now, you know, they're finding something. Crack on with these boys now. And Joan Mir will give you results if you give him something he can use, a tool he can use. And this is proof of it. Now, obviously, a combination of that is I'm assuming the bike works excellent around here because it's a Honda-owned circuit. I'm assuming they test a lot there, maybe. So they've got a lot of inside track on, so to speak, on maybe what setup-wise works and what doesn't. So good result either way. It was Zarco in second. No, it wasn't. It was Fabio in second, then just Zarco. Fabio had a strange race because he looked good pace-wise, but got beat up a bit early and never really recovered. There was one lap where I think he dropped about 5 places after getting shunted wide by Morbidelli. Then the sequence of corners that came, he was just out of sequence then, wasn't he? And everyone just kept picking him off. It was ruthless. 8th for Fabio, by the way. Then it was Miguel Oliveira continues his decent form, picking up real life points in 14th. Somkiat Chantra, real life points, 15th place. He's 5th in the All Japan Cup this week. Then Rins 6th. He was well off it, to be fair, Rins. It was a long way back, even off, almost 5 seconds back off Chantra. I don't know if he's had a run off somewhere, or you don't see that kind of stuff when you're watching the race because they're never showing people at that position, are they? But at the same time, yeah, maybe he was just real slow. Non-finishers for Miller looked like he had a chain go. So is that 2 in a row? 2 races in a row we've seen a chain go, which you don't see for sometimes years at a time. Because Pedro's was that in Mazzano? It might have been. Or was the one before. But Pedro's went, I want to say in Mazzano, and now Miller's has gone here. Had a chain hanging off. Taka didn't finish. He ran wide and then dropped the bike in the dirt. And then Luke Marini had a problem early in the race. So I still don't know what that is, but I think it's a technical DNF, that one. In the championship, Fabio Quartararo, 88 points. Zarco, 73. Marini, 70. Mir, 53. Jack, 45. Rins, 43. Miguel, 29. Chantra, 11. He's actually getting ahead now, clearly, of the part-timers. Augusto on 10. Taka, 8. Aleix, 2. And Yamaha has dropped the lead once again now in the championship. Constructors to Honda, they're 2 points behind. It's 217 to 215. Fantasy. Now, in my attempt to try and claw back points and try and chase a top 10 right at the death here, I have made another couple of changes this week. I took out Alex and I put in Bez, and to afford that, I took out Frankie and put in Raul Fernandez. I don't know if that worked out to me getting more points than I would have done anyway, but the real money here was if anyone was smart enough to put Pecco in. Let me know if you did. But I'm assuming with the price of Pecco, still at 3 million, it's not cheap. Would you have had to have sacrificed Marc in order to afford it, or sacrifice Ducati as one of your 2 constructor or team? But look, the good news is I have moved up in all the leagues I'm in. So I have gone up from, I think it was about 26th, 27th last time out, and I'm up to 22nd now. So whatever I've done has kind of worked. I've moved up the rankings a little bit, and the top 10 looks like this. Still at the top, Kudo Racing. MotoGP Go Fast in second. Laquinho third. JJD 84th. Still, it's the same faces. Combat Wombat 5th. Shifty 6th. Team Motosexual Wes, favourite of the channel, 7th. Showtime 89 8th. Salamanca Team 9th. Is that a new one? Is that a new one cracking the 10? And with a boost still to use. And then Legends Racing 10th. We will read out further down the rankings, maybe at the end of the season, just to see where a couple of our favourites have ended up throughout the season. Because I can see a few of them sort of in the top 20, but not quite in the top 10. So it'll be interesting. Right, Moto 2. Daniel Gardo's looking seriously impressive. He continues this ridiculous run of form. He's won the race at a canter here. There was a bit of late pressure from Dixon, but he was always too far away to really be able to do anything, and I think Elgato knew that. So maybe he was just bringing it home. But a good result for Dixon. Moreira, I mean, did what he could on the day. Didn't look like he had that much pace, but still ended up on the podium. Alonso 4th. I wouldn't say I'd be expecting more from Alonso at this point in his career, except for the fact that Elgato's been so good. So I would have thought this would be about right, but since Elgato's been so bloody good, it's like, well, should he be doing better? Gonzalez had an interesting day. He made it harder for himself when he didn't really have to, but he's ended up salvaging 5th perfectly enough for what he needs to do, so there's nothing wrong with that. Few old faces got to the front, like we said with Dixon. Arbolino was there or thereabouts the whole Grand Prix. But it really was a procession from the beginning, from the first lap with Elgato getting to the front, and they never saw him again. Seriously impressive, this kid. I'm getting Aldeguer vibes, you know. We'll see if he can carry that on into next season. It really is making it interesting. It's the kind of form that gets you a contract before you even have to turn a wheel next season, though, doesn't it? But I do want to point out, and I have done in the past few races, that it is good to see now going into next season. It's going to make the start of next season very interesting with the guys starting to find a bit of pace and form. Obviously, Elgato and Alonso, but also that crop of those couple of seasons, Ortola, Vaya, Guevara running near the front for a period. So that sort of generation, let's call them, of rider coming to the front now and looking like they can set themselves up for like a bit of a tilt at it next season. Development wise, it's looking all right. And then I think that's where you'll see the end of your Arbolinos. Obviously Dixon's going. Baltus maybe could be a victim of that. Arbolino definitely, even like Alonso Lopez and guys like that. So this next crop coming in finally put an end to that. And it does look like it's going to be one of the more talented grids next season with these guys at their best. And then maybe, you know, the likes of Rueda coming up. So it's going to be strong. It's going to be strong. It won't be one of them years where it's like, are we looking towards Canet, Gonzalez, whatever, to be your challengers? Now, Gonzalez will stay, and I dare say he will be the only one that can really stop one of these young lads from doing the business. But geez, Elgato's looking like, for all money, like he's the guy to beat next season. We'll see if it can continue on, because we know with Aldeguer, sometimes it doesn't quite work out that way. Moto3 had an interesting one, a breakaway leader in this one, which we don't often get, with David Munoz pulling quite a lead and then winning by, well, there wasn't a huge gap in the end, but big in Moto3 standards. Rueda was class again, and Quiles, Peroni were good value throughout. Kelso good value early on. Got shafted out at one point, got turfed out wide at one point, never recovered as the rain started coming down. So what happened was, it was a very weird race. As the sprinkling of rain came down, the guys who were kind of near the front kind of lost a bit of pace. And then it was like mainly the Hondas, I want to say, sort of started to come good when it was a bit iffy conditions. And David Munoz obviously pulled a gap then, because we know he doesn't slow down probably for rain. He just went for it, and fair play to him, it won him the race, just being brave in those conditions. But then as the rain stopped and the track dried up again, all the ones that had pace earlier on started to have pace again at the end. So Rueda, Perone, Kelso started to find a bit of time at the end. Was what it was, that one. It was it's certainly an interesting race for Moto3. Piqueras wasn't able to apply any pressure despite being ahead of him at points in the Grand Prix, any pressure to Rueda, and ended up dropping back towards the end. I think he had a couple of moments where he ran wide and never recovered. So and also didn't look like he really had the pace. So that was that. As you can tell, I'm a bit tired today. So and I've spoken for a long time here because I went on there's a long video, this one. Obviously, we had a lot to cover. It's next week, Indonesia, another early start. So again, it'll be one of those ones where I don't really see practice and stuff. I don't really know a lot about what's going on that gets talked about in the build-up, but definitely will be, I think so, an hour later start this one. So we'll be up for this one, both of them. So I won't have to try and find my replay on TNT Sports that never arrives. So yeah, we'll see you on that one. Take it easy.